This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Starting the show is David Schemm, State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, as he discusses expanded FSA programs and a summary from the recent report from Secretary Rollins. K-State Extension agronomist Tina Sullivan keeps the show going as she explains the drying down process for soybeans and what the crop looks like around the state. Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast in the show, where they talk about heart disease in many species and its impact on the animal. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show talking with the State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
David, today giving a quick program update on a few different things at the Farm Service Agency, and starting with the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program, ECAP. David, what's an update there?
Here just recently, Secretary Rollins made the announcement to increase the ECAP payment factor from that 85%, if some of our producers remember, that we paid out, to 99%. And I know it was the Secretary's priority, and also from a state perspective, our priority is definitely to get those payments out very quickly to our producers here. So have definitely rock and rolled on that. Here just in the last couple of days, we've sent out over $100 million. The total amount that we've paid out here in Kansas for ECAP, we're sitting at $731 million to Kansas producers across the state there, Shelby. So obviously, it's a busy time of the year with fall harvest and everything like that, but just with the current farm economy and even the Secretary making the comments, we're aware of a lot of input prices and bills coming in for our producers there. So we're making sure it's a priority that we get these out as fast as we can to our producers.
So if producers have already received that 85% check, are they going to see that last 14 come anytime?
According to our record, Shelby, I would say definitely a majority of the producers should have already gotten it. And I would say by the end of today here, almost all of our producers should have gotten that additional amount there. So, like I said, it was definitely a big priority push here, especially when we're looking at today, September 30th. This is the end of our fiscal year for the federal government. So we wanted to make sure that we got these payments out, and also being aware of maybe, how would I say, a little bit of the uncertainty as far as what's going to happen as far as a budget for the government and whether or not we're able to be open tomorrow.
Are there any updates when it comes to CRP?
Yep. I want a quick note for our producers out there, Shelby. September 30th, which is actually today, or I know this may be not get aired till tomorrow, but CRP signatures were due by producers that had approved contracts. So, we're getting all those programs, the CRP programs, all those sign-ups, those are contracts approved, signed, and sent out the door so that we can start to get those payments out here as we look into the future for those new contracts for producers there. So that's been a high priority for us as well, Shelby.
Have you also been able to send out money for SDRP?
Yep, we have continued to work on our supplemental disaster recovery program there. We're sitting it now at over almost $630 million that we've sent out to the state, and 88% of our applications have been filed. And, we're, again, trying to finish wrapping up some of those there. One of the things I will mention that is that we're expecting a stage 2 of the SDRP to come out here in October here, and it will be addressing more of the shallow loss that the Secretary had talked about earlier on, shallow losses that maybe were not covered by crop insurance for our producers there. So again, be looking for some announcements coming out here soon on that SDRP stage 2. And for producers to be able to sign up for on that.
And you mentioned that 88% of applications have been filed. So for those last 12%, if they haven't gotten filed, can they still get them filed?
Yep, absolutely. They can still get them filed. There is no deadline right now on that program, on that sign up there. So they can definitely get in and get filed. For the most part, that last 12%, a lot of times just the various dynamics that offices are already working with producers, trying to contact maybe all the individuals associated with an entity or various things like that to make sure that we can file that application there. But yeah, for those producers out there that haven't, definitely go in and sign up for that stage 1 of SDRP, and our offices can get you taken care of. Like I say, more to come on a stage 2 here, but that should be coming out here fairly soon.
David, Secretary Rollins recently had some announcements, and do you have a report or summary of what you think is important for Kansas producers to get from it?
The Secretary made a lot of announcements that was really interesting and very, very exciting to be able to listen to her and what she's got planning on the future. Whether it's talking about livestock, concern over whether it's the screwworm that's going on out there and USDA being able to handle it, and also concern as far as our cattle numbers and trying to create programs that will help to maybe increase those beef numbers. The one thing it was always great to hear her talk about is that it's really about maybe working with some working lands or maybe additional grazing areas. Not a payment, and she was quite clear when she said that, not some type of payment for our livestock producers, but ways to help incentivize our producers to be able to increase those herds there. And then is really obviously she acknowledged the challenges that producers have right now with the lower commodity prices and the high input costs, and looking at ways that, evaluating, making sure there's good competition out there on the input side there, and so that producers have a competitiveness there, that they can realize they're getting a good price on their input prices, but also the acknowledgement that we've got to get our crop prices up there, and obviously trade. We're working hard on trade and getting that done, but producers are feeling a crunch right now with the low prices with where they're at there. So she kind of talked about a 5-step, that 5 points that she's wanting to accomplish, and it was really great to be able to listen to the Secretary.
And while we're thinking about our Kansas producers, a new grazing period for some in southeast Kansas?
Recently, we kind of looked at and have been evaluating, and the state committee decided to take some action. So there's about 10 counties in southeast Kansas, kind of the Allen, Bourbon, Chautauqua, Cherokee, Crawford, Elk, Labette, Montgomery, Neosho, Wilson, and Woodson. Some of those producers down there are working with what we call improved grass, kind of a little bit more intensively managed grass acres there, and the ability to have an increased capacity for those highly managed grass acres. So, we have taken that into consideration, and has improved grazing period, so that now it goes from March 15th through November 30th with a capacity of 2 acres per animal unit. So, those producers down there, they will have a kind of an expanded grazing season that they can capitalize on there for the ones that have decided to more intensively manage their grass acres in that southeast Kansas there. So that was just recently passed there, Shelby.
You've mentioned that today, as we record, it is September 30th in the morning, and we don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, but can you give us an overview of what might be happening with the Farm Service Agency as you end your fiscal year?
So obviously September 30th is a big day for our end of our fiscal year, and relying upon the appropriators, Congress, to be able to pass a budget for us to be able to continue to keep our doors and do business out there, Shelby. So if nothing is passed or approved by Congress here, by law, we have to close and can't do business after midnight tonight there. Employees tomorrow, if we would happen to go into a shutdown, would simply be coming into offices to make sure everything's shut down, and then they would have to be returning home there. And from our perspective there, we'll obviously be taking direction from national office. There's just a lot of dynamics that play for us, Shelby, because we don't know how long the shutdown will occur, whether it's going to be a half a day, or maybe it's going to be for a week or 2 weeks there. I will say it this way, unfortunately, unfortunate pleasure during my first tenure back in 19 to be part of a 35-day shutdown. So there's a lot of dynamics that really come in here and play for our employees, but also definitely for our producers out there the longer the government stays shut down there. So, there are steps that we'll be taking for our producers there. If they would happen to have loans with us, maybe a payments due or something like that, as far as delivering checks to us. So if we stay shut down through a certain period of time, there's going to come a point where, there may be some of our employees that will come into the office to make sure that we're processing and taking some of those checks that need to be to make sure that, we can kind of get some of those required stuff done there. But, for the most part, Shelby, it really is a shutdown for us. Our employees go home, and basically what they have to do is wait by the TV or the news or their phone, whatever, be watching news to see if some funding does get passed. And once that funding does get passed, they report back into the office there. So I want to comment. I used to think before I had this position that it was a vacation for federal employees to be furloughed when the government shut down. And I would tell you this much, talking with all of our employees, as well as my perspective, I would much rather be able to come in here and get work done. But, I know the Congress and them, they need to do their deliberation and figure out where they're going to be at. So we'll just simply wait. And when the time comes that we get funding again, we'll be back in the office and going about business again there. So definitely communicate to producers out there that we'll try to make sure that we get some of the basic needs done for them. And then once we get open back up, we'll be back to normal.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing soybeans getting ready to be harvested with K-State Extension agronomist Tina Sullivan. Tina, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shelby.
Tina, before we talk about soybeans getting close to being ready to be harvested in parts of the state, what has the season looked like for soybeans?
The season has had kind of been a mixed bag effect. Some of our soybeans have done really well. We've gotten rain at the right time. Other places we've gotten a little too much rain. If we think about that north central corridor, I was receiving phone calls last week about, are these soybeans going to recover? They sat underwater for 30 hours. Beans are starting to yellow. The plants themselves are yellowing. They're missing some beans in those pods. Whereas other places, maybe they've missed a rain or two. They're kind of in that dry to almost abnormally dry, even though when we look at the statewide drought monitor, most of the state is white, saying we don't have drought in those areas. But then when we across that northern border, so from Republic all the way over to Doniphan and then down our Missouri line, we are having some abnormally and moderate drought. Kind of been missing those rains.
For those beans that have set in water for longer than what would be ideal, will they be okay?
Potentially. I mean, we're late enough in the season. We should have, we are past pod set. We're in that bean, filling seed. So it's more of, can the plant that has been sitting in water recover from that lack of oxygen, right? When the roots are sitting in saturated soils, it's less of a disease situation, even though disease could set in like charcoal rot, which then causes a lodging issue. So then the bean falls over, making harvestability pain in the butt. But when we think about those nodules where our rhizobia are fixing the last bit of nitrogen needed in those beans, they've gone underwater for, again, some extended situations of 30 plus hours. They just don't got the oxygen that they need to then push nitrogen up the plant to move into those beans. So in some of these situations, we may actually be seeing smaller beans in pods.
When we're thinking about the soybeans this year, are you seeing some really tall ones as well?
So some of our beans are pretty tall. I've walked through a few fields and I'm 5'5", and these beans were almost tickling underneath my chin of height. So just because they're super tall, we still need to look into that canopy and see where our pods are. Just because some of those pods actually may be empty. Kind of been very maturity group dependent, planting date dependent, and then this weather. Again, some places have gotten the timely rains, others have not. Maybe some have gotten rains that accumulated way too much. So it is going to be kind of this mixed bag of soybeans this year, and kind of looking at the USDA progress and conditions based on the September 21st date. Just thinking about those leaves dropping, so heading towards harvest, we were at 41%, which was behind 52% of for last year and the 50% average. Harvest was sitting at 1%. We're not near harvest yet. So again, thinking about our weather conditions and what's driving that drying down.
What does that process look like then for soybeans reaching their time to be harvested?
Much like when we think about corn, we do have a black layer in those soybean seeds. Soybeans will hit that final maturity with high seed water content from with R6 being about 75 to 80% water. And then as we move into R7, we should drop to 50% water. And then as we head into final maturity, we should be less than 30% moisture content within those seeds. So still high moisture content compared to crops like corn, because the seeds is different. And then when we think about soybeans, it's that oil content we're driving for, right? So moisture within beans is going to be different. But again, it's thinking about that black layer, just like in corn, for that maturity of soybeans.
At what speed does it usually dry down?
So when we think about soybeans, there's a lot of factors, like we mentioned, like, do we have these warm days like we see kind of coming in our weather reports? Also, high humidity is going to kind of dictate how fast we dry down. But overall, the drying down rate for soybeans is 3%, which is 3 times faster than corn that sits about at 1% dry down per day. And then there's sorghum that's even less at 0.7% dry down. So soybeans can dry down very quickly compared to other crops, making that shatterability in those pods where we lose beans actually a bit more concerning.
What could impact that speed of dry down?
Overall, just like corn, it's driven by temperature. Kind of looking at our weather reports, we're going to have some hot days, kind of, we want fall as we head into October, but 90-degree days are definitely not fall. Humidity, so if we start getting some lower humidity days, those beans will dry down faster. High humidity, especially in those still very green canopies, trap in that moisture, so they can't release as much moisture. And again, overall, that water content at the black layer. Some beans may actually have more water or less water at that black layer formation, which depends on maturity group, planting date, and a bunch of other factors like weather earlier in the season. So we have to kind of think about how all those factors are interacting with each other.
What is the goal for moisture on soybeans?
We are aiming for 13% moisture of those soybeans when we go to harvest.
What do you recommend growers make sure they take a look at or are looking for when they go into their soybean fields?
So when you're going into your field, there's not a perfect way of looking at what's that content of the soybean moisture, right by look at the, scout through your field, look at the situations. Maybe if there's a lodging situation, you're going to need to prioritize that field, just because as the plant is lodged, you have more potential of losing beans because the plant is fallen over. They can shatter more. Same if the field has been hit by more disease. So think of those SDS situations, sudden death, or again, those charcoal rots in those really wet areas. Fields that maybe have been on the opposite side of the spectrum, more droughty, we haven't been getting those rains, they're going to dry down probably a bit faster because they did not hit their black layer with as much moisture in those pods to have to lose. So kind of just keeping an eye on those fields, looking at the beans, looking at the foliar drop, as we're going into full maturity, and thinking about which of these fields is going to have to be harvested first, because there might also be a delay in which ones can we even get into, right?
Overall, Tina, how do you feel like the soybean crop is going to come out this year?
Oh, isn't that a double-edged sword of a question, right? I think we're going to have some beans that are going to do exceptionally well. We're going to have other beans who probably don't do exceptionally well. It's going to kind of be a I want to say it's, kind of throwing darts at a board of where we're at. Because again, some places did really well this year, others didn't. Sometimes we got those well-timed rains. Sometimes we got rains right after planting that caused a crusting issue, and the beans never really caught up because they never emerged fully correctly. Yes, beans are very plastic, they can kind of bring out foliage and they can kind of fill in those gaps, but still there was kind of a setback at the beginning. Other areas, it's been droughty. Those beans are going to kind of suffer as they kind of go into this still hotter fall, going into a warmer fall than we really want, with not really rain much in sight. So it's kind of going to be this mixed bag. And I'm trying not to be, all boo-hoo or all look at all how great the beans are, because I also understand we're under some, kind of trade issue situations, and all that kind of is a little depressing.
Tina, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
That was K-State Extension agronomist Tina Sullivan. In today's show notes on agtoday.net, I will link an agronomy e-update article that covers soybean drying as well. If you would like to find it for yourself, you can go to eupdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey as they discuss the latest USDA crop progress report, which indicates progress is slowing somewhat in maturity of the nation's corn crop.
When it comes to corn crop maturity of late, a slowing period is noted. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey from the latest crop progress report for the period ending September 28th.
71% of the crop fully mature. That is 3 percentage points behind the 5-year average of 74% and just slightly behind last year's 73%. What is holding that national number down is some delayed maturity in some of our northern and western states.
With 5 of 18 reporting states indicating corn maturity at least 10 percentage points behind their state's 5-year average.
That list includes Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. And the state that has the least corn mature by September 28th is North Dakota, 41%. 5-year average there is 56%.
Meanwhile, corn harvest is at 18% as of September 28th, 1 percentage point behind the same time last year. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Once again, that was U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rod Bain and Brad Rippey. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but when we come back, we'll be joined by the Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson for their weekly Beef Cattle Institute segment. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson.
I saw an article that caught my eye, and this was an article from 2024 that looked at prevalence of heart lesions in multiple species in the Czech Republic. And so this was one that we've talked about heart disease in cattle. We've talked about heart disease in the feedlot scenario. But I thought this was interesting because they looked at animals at slaughter. And I'll tell you the species that they looked at and some of the prevalences they found of heart disease, and wanted to get your feedback or if this was expected or unexpected. So they looked at cows, heifers, bulls, calves, sows, finisher pigs, piglets, ewes, lambs, does, and kids. And the highest prevalence of chronic heart disease they found was in piglets at about 14%. The next highest was in finisher pigs at about 8%, followed by adult cows and calves. But they found it in all those species that I listed. Is that what you guys expected, or is that unexpected?
Well, it would be kind of interesting to dig into those reports a little bit more. But, the heart is an incredibly important organ. And yes, it can have a number of different ways. So heart disease is not one disease. You can have problems with the heart valves. You can have problems with the heart muscles. You could have problems on the left side of the heart or the right side of the heart. You could have an infectious disease that infects either the heart or the sac around the heart. So heart disease is actually several pretty different diseases. And so it shouldn't really be surprising that we could have those types of problems. The other thing is the body is pretty good at adjusting, at least for a while. So these heart disease, what they found at slaughter didn't kill the animals. So the heart wasn't functioning at optimum levels, but the animal compensated and was able to survive and maybe even do pretty well. So the heart is one of those things that the body has ability to compensate, at least until it gets really bad. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I'm not that surprised. There can be a lot of different causes of heart problems, and the body does compensate as long as it can. But that's why then sometimes it goes south really fast.
Some of the young ones, a little bit of a surprise to me. Todd, what about you?
Not terribly surprised. And a lot of the reason for that is it goes back to our previous conversation about breeding. What are the endpoints that we're selecting for? We're not selecting for food animals to become athletes. We're selecting them to get to a mature body weight and to a finishing composition of body weight as quickly as we possibly can. And so in that selection, there's going to be a trade-off. And it does not surprise me at all that trade-off might be at the expense of heart function.
Well, and I think a couple of things here, and Bob mentioned it, heart disease is complex. So one thing to think about, in this paper, they just looked at the hearts. What we'd really want to know how functional that heart was is looking at the liver, looking at some of the other organs, because there are variations among normal. And we've looked at that in our necropsy projects the last several years. I think there's times that we don't always assess the heart as closely as we could. It was interesting to me in this paper that all life stages, both young and old, had heart changes that they described as chronic. In this particular paper, they didn't really outline what that meant, chronic heart changes. I assume that it was a change in the size or shape of that heart, but I don't really know. So I think it's worth looking at. Interesting paper. We'll follow up.
Once again, that was the Beef Cattle Institute's Brad White, Bob Larson, and Todd Gunderson. If you'd like to hear the rest of their Cattle Chat podcast, you can do so by going to ksubci.org or by searching for Cattle Chat on your favorite podcast streaming platform. If you do have questions for the specialist over at the Beef Cattle Institute, you can submit them by emailing bci@ksu.edu. Once again, that email address is bci@ksu.edu. I will link all of this information in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.